Shalom and welcome to this channel. We will be covering Revelation chapter 8, but before we get into it, let's just do a short recap. Previously, we looked at seal 1 to seal 6 in chapter 6, the sealing of the 144 servants of God from the 12 tribes of Israel in chapter 7, from verse 1 to 8, and also we learned of a great multitude who came out of the great tribulation, clothed in white robes and had palm branches in their hands, and they were worshipping God before the throne in heaven. Now in chapter 8, we're going to hear of the opening of the last seal, which is seal 7, and also learn of the sounding of the 7 trumpets. Let's read the Revelation chapter 8, verse 1 to verse 6. When he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth. And there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. That was Revelation chapter 8 from verse 1 to 6. So we hear of silence in heaven when the 7th seal, which is the last seal, was opened. The silence must indicate that those in heaven, that is the angels, the 24 elders, the 4 living creatures, etc., that we read about in the previous chapters. That means they are seeing what is to come next, hence the silence. Then John sees 7 angels who stand before God and were given 7 trumpets. So these 7 angels have a role to administer God's judgment. So that means what we're going to see next are God's judgments being administered on the earth. And then we see another angels now besides the 7 with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar before God. So it means there will still be saints or believers on earth when these trumpet judgments are administered. So the angel offered the incense with the prayers of the saints. That means the saints will be praying on earth, and those prayers will be going up to heaven. Hence we see now that the angel offered the incense with the prayers of the saints, and the smoke ascends from God from the angel's hand. Meaning the prayers, the believers are praying on earth, their prayers are going up, the angel is mixing the prayers of the saints with the incense that he was given, and the smoke ascends before God from the angel's hand. Which means then that the angel offered what was acceptable before God, meaning those prayers of the saints were acceptable before God, because it's very important that whatever we offer God needs to be acceptable. So in response to the offering then, the angels takes the censer and fills it with fire from the altar, and then he throws it to the earth. So the saints who were praying on earth were receiving their answers to their prayers when the angels then was throwing that fire from the altar to the earth. That means the saints were receiving answers to their prayer. Or we could say that their prayer triggered a response from God. And as a result, we are hearing that there were noises, there were thunderings, lightning, and an earthquake. So that was what happened upon the opening of the 7th seal. So from verse 6 going to the end of this chapter, we'll hear now then of the trumpets. Remember, in verse 2, those angels were prepared to sound the trumpets, the 7 angels. But now from verse 6, we're going to hear what happened when those trumpets were sounded. Verse 6 and 7. So the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. So these are judgments of God. These angels are prepared in heaven. So it is God who is administering these judgments through his angels. So the first trumpet will affect the earth. Hence we hear of hail and fire that was mingled with blood was thrown to the earth. So earth will be affected by the sounding of the first trumpet. And the result of that will be the third of trees and all the green grass being burned up, meaning the vegetation, a third of the vegetation will be burned up. Verse 8 and 9. Then the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So the second trumpet will affect the sea. Something like a burning mountain with fire will be thrown into the sea. Remember, this is future, still something that will happen. It will be thrown into the sea. And the result of that will be the third of the sea becoming blood. And a third of living creatures will die. Things like fish and all the other creatures that are known and unknown to us, a third of those will die. And a third of ships will be destroyed. Meaning whoever will be doing business on the sea will lose. Those who will be doing business on the sea will lose, because a third of the ships which will be on the sea will be destroyed. Verse 10 and 11. Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water, because it was made bitter. So the third trumpet will affect the rivers and springs of water. When that great star that is called wormwood falls into the waters and the springs of water. And the result of that then will be many men will die from the water, because it was made bitter. This implies then that the water will be poisoned by this wormwood. And you see here, it doesn't specify the number of men who will die. It says many men, meaning whoever will be drinking that water or using that water, consuming that water, will die. Those who rely on rivers for water, then they will be greatly affected. And also those who rely on springs of water, they will also be greatly affected. Let's ponder about this star called wormwood. Could this star be a fallen angel? And I'm asking this because we saw that with the first and the second trumpet, that is the hail with fire mingled with blood, and what looked like a mountain burning with fire, we heard that those were thrown onto the sea and onto the earth. But with this star, it fell. It was not thrown, but it fell. So it makes me believe that it is possible that it's not a natural star, but a fallen angel. And we also read of something of this nature in Revelation chapter 9 verse 1, where a star that falls from heaven is referred to as him, meaning it's not an it. If it was just a not normal star that we see on the sky, it would be saying it. But in Revelation 9 verse 1, a star that falls from heaven is referred to as him. Hence, I believe that this is a fallen angel, this wormwood. Even though it might appear like a star, meaning it appeared like a star when John saw it, but it might be a fallen angel. Let's continue. Verse 12. Then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. So the fourth trumpet will affect the third of the sun, moon, and the stars. And as a result, the third of the day will not shine because the sun will be affected. A third of the night will not shine because the moon and stars will also be affected. So we can see, even though what was above or what is above will be judged, the effects of it will be felt like down below, meaning on the earth, because darkness will affect all those who will be on the earth. So even though it is the skies that are judged, but the effect will be felt by people on the earth. Verse 13, and I looked, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the three angels who are about to sound. So I looked up the word woe on the Oxford Dictionary, and it means great distress or sorrow or trouble. So this angel, whom other translations refer to it as an eagle, will fly in the midst of heaven, warning of the three terrible woes that are coming, more terrible than what we have experienced when the first four trumpets were sounded. So to conclude, brethren, the trumpets are God's judgments. This judgment will affect the earth, the sea, the rivers and springs of water, the skies, meaning the sun, moon, and the stars. Many will be affected, for instance, farmers who rely on grass to feed their livestock. So whether you do farming for commercial purposes or not, you will be affected. Fishermen will also be affected when the third of the sea becomes blood and the living creatures die. And all the business on the sea will be affected. For instance, the ship, third of the ship will be destroyed. So that means transportation by sea will be affected. And then when there's darkness, you can imagine the chaos that will be occurring on the roads, for instance, when suddenly a third of the day doesn't shine. So everyone will be affected by this. So the great distress is coming, brethren. We need to be prepared. We now know that saints will be on earth when all this takes place. But remember, the judgments of God are not for believers. Even though we will be on earth, but those who are truly Christ will be protected. I hope this study has given you more understanding of this book and of this chapter that we've just studied and read. Be blessed, brethren, and shalom.